I was the real daughter. The Whitmore family had finally found and brought home. To make them like me, I became painfully, desperately obedient, their adopted daughter. Madison Whitmore laughed at me and said, "You stink. Why don't you crawl into the stair Alizair and bake yourself clean?" Without saying a word, I climbed into the large industrial sterilizer and pressed the start button. My parents nearly lost their minds. They smashed the door open and dragged me out. My skin burned bright red. My older brother, Ethan Whitmore, stared at me with disgust. "Who are you putting on this act for? If you really want to die, go swallow some sleeping pills." That night, I swallowed an entire bottle of sleeping pills. By the time Ethan kicked open my bedroom door, my breathing had already stopped. He stared at my cold body and his hands shook uncontrollably. Later, Madison slipped, scraped her skin and started crying. Ethan roared at me, "If her leg scars, you better cut out your own flesh and patch it onto her." So I picked up a shard of broken glass, did at the top of my thigh and sliced down hard. My parents arrived just in time to scream in horror. Ethan went mad and snatched the shard away. I was just angry. Who the hell told you to take it seriously? They did not know that during the 7 years I spent in the mountains, disobedience really could get me killed. Blood poured out of me, running down my thigh and dripping onto the carpet. The carpet quickly turned to dark. Ugly red sharp pain ripped through my leg. I was used to pain during those 7 years in the mountains. I hurt every day compared with that. This pain was almost nothing. Ethan's hand trembled as he held the glass shard he had taken from me. My mother screamed and threw herself toward me, pressing both hands over the wound. Blood seeped between her fingers. Almost immediately, my father fumbled for his phone to call 911. But shaking hands, dropped it onto the floor. Ethan turned and screamed at me. "Are you insane? I tell you to cut yourself and you actually do it." I looked at him calmly. "Didn't you tell me to?" "Ethan, if I obeyed, I would not get beaten. That was the only survival rule those 7 years had taught me. I could not disobey. If I disobeyed, they would tie me to a tree and starve me for 3 days." I braced one hand against the floor and tried to reach for another piece of broken glass. That piece was too small. It might not be enough to patch her. Ethan flipped a coffee table beside him. A glass cup shattered across the floor. His eyes were red as he yelled, "Get away from it, don't touch that shit." I immediately pulled my hand back, dropped to my knees, and slammed my forehead into the bloody glass fragments. "I'll obey, please don't be mad." Even my mother began sobbing beside me. She hugged me tightly. I did not dare move. I simply let her hold me. The ambulance arrived. Paramedics lifted me onto a stretcher at the hospital. The doctor began stitching my wound without anesthesia. Because when the nurse went to get the anesthetic, Madison came crying into the room. There was a bandage on her leg, where she had scraped herself after slipping earlier that day. She threw herself into my mother's arms and sobbed, "Mom, does Clara hate me that much? She hurt herself in front of Ethan on purpose, so he blamed me." Ethan frowned and turned toward me. "Clara, do you have to make this entire family miserable?" I immediately stopped the nurse from getting the anesthetic. "No anesthesia, I accept the punishment." The doctor froze with a needle in his hand. I said, "Shit." The sound of needle and thread-piercing flesh was very clear. I did not even furrow my brow. Madison hid behind my mother and covered her mouth. My mother turned away, unable to look. Ethan raked a hand through his hair. "What are you doing now? Pretending to be tough? Who said anyone wanted to punish you?" After the stitches were done, the doctor suggested keeping me in the hospital for observation. My father went to handle the admission paperwork. Only Ethan and I were left in the hospital room. He sat on the couch and smoked Clara. "This whole murder act won't work. Madison was spoiled growing up. Can't you just give in to her a little?" I nodded, "Okay. I'll do whatever you say." Ethan crushed out his cigarette and looked at me. "If you really listen, go apologize to Madison." I lifted the blanket and got out of bed. The wound on my leg tore open from the movement, and blood seeped through the bandage. I did not pause barefoot. I walked to Madison's hospital room. Madison was eating an apple my mother had peeled for her. When she saw me come in, she shrank into the blanket in fear. My mother immediately stepped in front of her. "Clara, what are you doing here?" I walked forward and dropped straight to my knees. My kneecap struck a tile with a dull thud. "I'm sorry." Then I began to bow again and again. My forehead hit the floor, the sound echoing through the hospital room. I shouldn't have scared Madison. I shouldn't have made Ethan angry. I was wrong. My mother grabbed me in terror. "Clara, what are you doing?" She pushed her hand away and continued bowing in the mountains. An apology was not sincere unless your forehead bled. If you were not sincere enough, you did not get food. Ethan rushed in from outside. He grabbed my collar and yanked me up. Are you done yet? My forehead was covered in blood. Blood ran into my eyes, blurring my vision. I smiled at him. Are you satisfied now? Ethan let go of my hand and staggered 2 steps backward. Madison cried even louder from the bed. She's trying to drive me to death. Fine, I'll leave, okay? Madison ripped a 4-needle from the back of her hand and ran out. My mother hurried after her. Only Ethan and I were left in the room again. A nurse came in and bandaged my forehead. After she finished, she sighed and left. Afraid I would cause more trouble. Ethan discharged me from the hospital. When we returned from the hospital, my thigh was still wrapped in thick gauze. The Whitmore mansion was enormous. So enormous that I often got lost in it. At dinner, the long dining table was covered with dishes. I sat at the very end of the table. In front of me was only a bowl of plain white rice. That was my mother's instruction. She just came back from the hospital. Her stomach is weak, something bland is better. I picked up the bowl and ate quietly. Across from me, Madison used gold-rimmed chopsticks. Pick up a piece of abalone and place it elegantly into her mouth. She looked at me, a faint smile hanging at the corner of her lips. Clara, why are you grabbing your rice like that? Is that how people eat in the mountains? Like a little dog? I froze and looked at my hand holding the bowl. Then I put the bowl down, leaned forward and used my tongue to lick the rice from the bowl. Bang! My father, Richard Whitmore, slammed his palm onto the table. The silverware rattled loudly. This is outrageous. You're disgracing the Whitmore name. My mother's face turned pale. She pointed at me, lips trembling. What? What are you doing? Get up! Ethan's expression was the ugliest. He stood and kicked over the chair in front of me. Get out! Don't sit here and disgust everyone. I obediently stood and silently left the dining room. When I reached the doorway, Ethan's cold voice sounded again. You're not allowed back to your room. Go stay in the doghouse in the yard and think about what you did. I nodded to show I understood. That night it rained. I hugged my knees and curled up inside the cold doghouse. Rainwater dripped through the cracks in the roof and soaked my hair. I did not dare sleep because they had not said I was allowed to sleep. The rain did not stop. It drummed against the thin wooden roof of the doghouse, a relentless, heavy rhythm. Water seeped through the rotting floorboards, soaking into my hospital gown, mixing with the mud, and eventually, with the fresh blood oozing from my thigh. I did not shiver in the mountains. Shivering wasted energy. Energy was life. Somewhere around 3 a.m., the estate's golden retriever, Duke, trotted over from the covered patio. He sniffed the entrance of the doghouse, whined at the metallic scent of my blood, and lay down outside the entrance, blocking some of the biting wind. I reached out a heavy, trembling hand and buried my fingers in his dry, warm fur. He licked my blood-stained forehead. Go stay in the doghouse in the yard and think about what you did. Ethan's words looped in my head like a rusted tape recorder. I thought about what I did. I had eaten like a dog. Madison had asked if that was how people ate in the mountains. It was when the man in the mountains, the one I had been forced to call father, threw scraps onto the dirt floor. My hands were usually tied behind my back. If I didn't eat with my mouth, I starved. My leg throbbed, a hot, pulsing agony that traveled up my spine. The stitches had torn completely. I could feel the wet heat of infection setting in. My vision blurred into a kaleidoscope of gray and black. I must not sleep. They did not tell me I could sleep. I kept my eyes open, staring at the muddy grass, until the darkness swallowed me entirely. Clara. A sharp kick to the side of the doghouse. Clara, get out! The gardeners are coming! Stop throwing a tantrum. It was morning. The rain had stopped, but the air was freezing. Ethan's voice sounded muffled, as if I were underwater. I tried to move, to crawl out and obey, but my body refused. My arms were dead weight. Clara, I swear to God. Ethan knelt in the mud, peering into the shadows of the dog kennel. Later, I would learn what he saw. He saw a girl curled into a fetal position, her lips blue, her skin a shocking, deathly gray. The heavy gauze around her leg was soaked through with dark, congealed blood and yellow pus. Her forehead was plastered with dirt and blood from the glass shards. Duke was whining, nudging her lifeless arm. Clara? Ethan's voice cracked. The annoyance vanished, replaced by a sudden, jagged panic. Clara. He reached in and grabbed my shoulder. My skin was burning, radiating a violent fever as he pulled me out. My head lolled back limply against his arm. Mom. Dad. Ethan roared, his voice echoing across the manicured lawns. He scooped me up. I was shockingly light, 75 pounds of bone and bruised flesh. Call an ambulance. Now. I opened my eyes a fraction. Ethan's face was pale, his jaw tight. He was running toward the house. Put me down, I rasped, my throat feeling like sandpaper. Shut up, don't speak, he panted, bursting through the back doors. I'm dirty, I whispered, my eyes fixed on the pristine white Persian rug in the hallway. I'll make the floor dirty. You'll be angry. Ethan stopped dead in his tracks. He looked down at me, then at the mud and blood dripping from my body onto the expensive rug. A strange, choked sound escaped his throat. It sounded like a sob. I don't care about the rug, Clara, he whispered, his voice trembling violently. I don't care. My mother appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing a silk robe. She took one look at my lifeless, bleeding body in Ethan's arms and screamed. The hospital lights were blinding. This time, the Whitmore family money could not buy silence. I had collapsed with a severe infection, massive blood loss, and a fever of 104 degrees. When the ER nurses stripped off my ruined clothes to clean the wounds, the room went dead silent. The doctor, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Evans, stared at my body. My skin was a map of horror, cigarette burns on my ribs, rope scars etched deep into my wrists and ankles, a jagged, poorly healed scar across my abdomen where I had been kicked onto a rusted pitchfork, and now, the fresh, self-inflicted gouge on my thigh, the lacerated forehead, and the severe scalding across my back from the industrial sterilizer. "Where is the family?" Dr. Evans asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "In the waiting room," a nurse replied, looking sick. "Call the police now, don't let the family leave." I was drifting in and out of consciousness, floating on a sea of intravenous antibiotics, and finally, because the doctor demanded it, heavy painkillers. I felt no pain. It was terrifying. Pain was my compass. Without it, I didn't know what to do. In the waiting room, Ethan was pacing. His hands were stained with my blood. He hadn't washed them. He just kept staring at the dried rust color on his palms. Madison was crying softly in the corner, leaning against my mother. "She did this to punish us," Madison sniffled, wiping a tear. "She wants everyone to think we abuse her. Mom, she went into the doghouse on purpose to make Ethan look bad." "Shut up, Madison," Ethan snapped. Madison flinched, shocked. "Ethan?" "I said shut up," Ethan yelled, kicking a waiting room chair. "I told her to go to the doghouse. I told her to do it. And he looked at his hands again. "She just does whatever I say." She didn't even argue. Before my mother could soothe the argument, 2 uniformed police officers and a plainclothes detective walked into the waiting room. "Richard and Eleanor Whitmore?" the detective asked, flashing a badge. "I'm Detective Vance. I need you all to come down to the precinct now." "On what grounds?" my father demanded, stepping forward, using his authoritative CEO voice. "Our daughter is in the ER." "On the grounds of suspected severe physical abuse, neglect, and reckless endangerment," Vance said coldly. He looked at Ethan's bloody hands. "And I highly suggest you don't make a scene." The interrogation room was cold. Ethan sat across from Detective Vance. "My sister is mentally ill," Ethan said, running a hand through his hair. "She spent 7 years kidnapped. We just got her back. She acts out. She hurts herself for attention. She's jealous of our adopted sister, Madison." Detective Vance opened a manila folder. He slid a stack of photographs across the metal table. "Have you bothered to read the police report from her rescue in the Appalachian Mountains, Ethan?" Vance asked. Ethan frowned. "No, my parents handled the paperwork. We didn't want to dwell on the past. We wanted her to integrate, to act normal." "To act normal," Vance repeated flatly. "Let me tell you about normal for Clara." Vance tapped the first photo. It was a picture of a rusted iron cage inside a root cellar. "She was kept in here. The man who bought her from her kidnappers treated her worse than livestock. Do you know how he trained her to obey?" Ethan stared at the cage. The blood drained from his face. "No. If she cried, he broke her fingers. We x-rayed her hands today." Ethan 14 healed fractures. "If she refused to eat the slop he threw on the floor, he tied her to a tree and starved her for days. If she disobeyed a direct command, he used a skinning knife on her." Vance leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Ethan's. "She doesn't hurt herself for attention, you arrogant prick. She is surviving. Her brain is hardwired to believe that if she disobeys a direct command from an authority figure, she will be tortured or killed. So, when someone in your house told her to get into a boiling sterilizer, she did it. When you told her to cut her own flesh, she did it. When you told her to sleep in a doghouse in the freezing rain." "Stop," Ethan choked out. He clutched his stomach, suddenly feeling violently ill. "You didn't welcome a daughter home," Vance snarled. "You became her new wardens, and you were torturing a prisoner of war." Ethan bolted from his chair, stumbled to the trash can in the corner, and vomited. In the adjoining rooms, my parents were given the same reality check. My mother collapsed into a catatonic state of sobbing. My father sat in stunned, horrified silence as the illusion of his perfect family shattered. I spent 3 weeks in the hospital. The police investigation was a media nightmare for the Whitmore family, but due to the bizarre nature of the self-inflicted wounds, criminal charges were difficult to make stick. However, Child Protective Services and Adult Protective Services were now deeply involved. I was placed under a mandatory psychiatric hold, not because I was crazy, but to keep my family away from me. I sat by the window in the psychiatric ward, looking at the trees. It was peaceful here. They gave me food on a plastic tray. The nurses spoke softly. I always ate every bite, and I always washed my own tray. The nurses sometimes cried when they looked at me, which confused me. On the 21st day, the doctors allowed Ethan to visit supervised. He walked into the room. He looked terrible. He had lost weight, and he had a thick stubble. His arrogant, fiery posture was entirely gone. He looked like a broken man. He stopped a few feet from my chair. I immediately stood up, interlaced my fingers behind my back, and lowered my head, keeping my eyes fixed on his shoes. It was the stance of a prisoner. "Clara, please," Ethan's voice shattered the silence. "Please don't do that." I didn't move. "How should I stand, Ethan? Tell me. I will do it." He let out a choked sob. He dropped to his knees, right there on the linoleum floor. The proud, untouchable Ethan Whitmore, kneeling at my feet. "I'm sorry," he wept, grabbing the hem of my hospital gown. "I'm so sorry, Clara. God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. We thought you were just being stubborn. We didn't know you were terrified." I looked down at him. My heart felt absolutely nothing. The place where a sister's love should have been was a scorched, barren wasteland. "Do you want me to forgive you?" I asked plainly. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Yes, please come home. Let us fix this. Let us take care of you. We kicked Madison out. Mom sent her back to her biological aunt. She's gone. It's just us now, our real family." Madison was gone. The girl who laughed at me, who pushed me into corners. It didn't matter. She was just another hazard in the environment. "If I say I forgive you, will you stop crying?" I asked. Ethan froze. "What?" "I don't like loud noises," I said calmly. "If I forgive you, will you be quiet?" Ethan stared at me, the utter devastation of my broken psychology finally dawning on him. He realized, in that moment, that I wasn't speaking out of malice. I was negotiating a transaction, obedience for safety. "You don't have to forgive me," he whispered, standing up slowly. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to do, Clara, ever again." "I don't understand," I said, genuinely confused. "I know," he said, wiping his face, "but you're going to." The Whitmore family tried for 6 months. They transformed the mansion into a sanctuary. My father retired early to stay home. My mother took cooking classes so she could make my meals herself. Ethan abandoned his social life, spending his days reading books on severe trauma, PTSD, and mountain kidnapping cases. But a broken mirror cannot be perfectly glued back together. The cracks always show. I lived in their house, but I was a ghost when my mother tried to hug me. I held my breath and went stiff as a board until she let go. When my father bought me expensive dresses, I wore them, but I never looked in the mirror. I sat where they told me to sit. I ate what they told me to eat. The guilt was eating them alive. Every time I flinched when someone dropped a fork, Ethan looked like he wanted to die. Every time I asked for permission to use the bathroom, my mother would lock herself in her room and sob. They realized that their presence was my trigger. I didn't see them as parents or a brother. I saw them as my masters, and as long as I lived in that house, I would never be free. The climax of our family tragedy didn't end with a screaming match. It ended with a quiet conversation in the sunroom. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Dr. Eris Thorne, my court-appointed trauma therapist, had been working with me for months. He was the one who finally made my parents face the ultimate truth. Dr. Thorne sat across from my parents and Ethan. I sat beside him, staring at the coffee table. She is making progress, Dr. Thorne said gently, but the environment is inherently flawed. Clara associates this house, and your faces, with the extreme psychological break she suffered when she first returned. You demanded obedience, and she gave you her soul to survive. We've changed, my father pleaded, his voice thick with tears. We give her everything. You can't give her a blank slate, Dr. Thorne replied. Every time Clara looks at you, Ethan, she remembers slicing her own leg open because she thought you would kill her if she didn't. You cannot love away that kind of associative trauma. Ethan put his head in his hands. He was trembling. What are you saying, doctor? My mother asked, terrified. I'm saying Clara needs to leave. She needs a residential facility specializing in long-term Stockholm and captivity recovery, somewhere far away, somewhere with people she has no history with, where she can learn to make a choice without the fear of punishment. No, Ethan said, looking up. No, she's my sister. We just got her back. I turned my head and looked at Ethan for the first time since coming down from the mountains. I looked directly into his eyes without being ordered to. Ethan, I said softly. He stopped breathing. Yes, Clara? I want to go. The words hung in the air, heavier than iron. It was the first time I had expressed a desire, the first time I had used the word one. It wasn't an echo, it wasn't a programmed response, it was me. My mother let out a wail, covering her face. My father reached out and gripped her shoulder, tears finally spilling over his weathered cheeks. Ethan stared at me. He looked for a trace of anger, of revenge, but he found nothing but a tired, empty girl who desperately wanted to learn how to sleep without the lights on. Ethan swallowed hard, his face contorted in agony, but he nodded. Okay, Ethan whispered, his voice breaking. Okay, Clara, you can go. 2 weeks later, a sleek black car waited outside the Whitmore estate. It was taking me to a private, highly secluded recovery ranch in Montana. My bags were packed. The family stood on the front steps. They looked like mourners at a funeral. My father handed me an envelope. This is a trust fund. It's yours, only yours. No one can ever take it from you. Clara, if you never want to see us again, you will still always be provided for. I took the envelope. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. He flinched at the formal title but nodded, stepping back. My mother didn't try to hug me. She knew better now. She just stood there, her hands clasped tightly together, weeping silently. Be safe, my sweet girl, please be safe. Finally, Ethan stepped forward. He looked years older than he was. He kept his hands stuffed deep into his pockets so he wouldn't reach out and grab me. I'll never forgive myself, Ethan said, his voice low and raspy. I'm going to spend the rest of my life seeing your blood on the carpet, seeing you in that doghouse. I looked at him. The boy who had demanded I bleed, the boy who had saved me from the fever. Ethan, I said. Yeah. I don't hate you, I said truthfully. I don't have the energy to hate you. It wasn't forgiveness, it was just the truth, and somehow, that was worse for him. It meant he hadn't even earned my anger, he had only earned my absence. I turned and climbed into the back seat of the car. The driver closed the door, sealing me inside the quiet, leather-scented cabin. As the car pulled away, rolling down the long, winding driveway, I didn't look back. I looked out the window at the sky. It was a clear, brilliant blue for the first time in 7 years. My hands rested loosely in my lap. I wasn't clenching them. I wasn't waiting for a blow. I leaned my head against the cool glass. No one told me to close my eyes. But I closed them anyway and I slept.